Dan, you mentioned Waterfall and Agile there. How would you sum up Waterfall and Agile to, let's say, to non-technical stakeholders?
Okay, I'll have a go at that. So really, waterfall, I suppose, it's kind of a visual metaphor for the way that it works, in the sense that it's really got a kind of a start and a middle and an end, which is well aligned to the definition of a project, which has got a beginning, a middle, and an end, with the end typically being the launch. So I suppose what characterizes waterfall is that it's kind of a linear sequence of activities that are done in a predefined order. So if we apply that to a digital project, that typically means gathering the requirements, followed by a design process, followed by development, then testing and deployment, but with the overall set of requirements all grouped together across those stages. So rather than just choosing one particular feature or one particular improvement, we're talking about grouping all the requirements together, understanding the overall set of requirements at the beginning, producing all the designs for all those requirements in the next stage, developing them all, testing them all together, and then deploying them. So that kind of is the natural fit for a conventional project and quite a traditional way of working, and the same sort of approach that you would find in other industries like construction, etc. With Agile, that's more about promoting a sort of a constant flow of activity and improvement, typically designed to deliver prioritized value to a digital product, improvements, user benefits, etc., but in a more unitized way. So, prioritizing where the most value is, and then working in quite a lean and agile manner to deliver those as individual requirements. So I suppose if you look at the relative benefits of those, or the relative characteristics, waterfall by definition is quite linear, it's quite phase-based, it's quite predictable, and it tends to lock the scope of a project quite early on, whereas agile tends to start with a backlog of features and requirements, which are then prioritized and then moved into fairly short chunks of delivery in an iterative and incremental manner, taking feedback as it goes, to try and deliver value to an existing digital product more quickly. So they are quite different in their characteristics, if that makes sense.
But I've heard that Waterfall's too restrictive for digital projects these days, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's a view that's expressed a lot, and obviously the digital industry has grown up with a lot of agility in mind, and for very good reasons. There are lots and lots of agile purists out there, and it is absolutely a great methodology for delivering ongoing value and evolving and improving an existing digital product. So absolutely wouldn't dismiss it at all. I think the thing is, though, is that in a lot of the work that we do, we're working in circumstances where what's needed to achieve a truly agile approach just isn't viable. And I say that for a few reasons. First of all, we're often in situations where the commercial imperative means that clients need the visibility of the cost of their project up front. And equally, there is an expectation that they will have a very clear understanding of the timeline, and some reassurance that the commitment to the delivery of those core requirements, especially in a new product context, are going to be met. So by very definition of that, to give that confidence and to establish those really clear and predictable parameters of cost, time, and scope, you need to take a reasonably linear approach anyway, because you've got to gather enough information up front at the start of the project to make sure that the goals are clear, that the requirements are clear. And you also need to do enough of an assessment about what each one of those requirements is going to take to deliver in order to build a meaningful project cost. And the other element to it is that you also need to recognize that projects are ultimately built by people, and the teams and the collaboration of different roles and different team members across organizational boundaries between us as a development partner and the client and any other companies that are involved. All of that relies on a level of predictability and certainty as to what those roles and responsibilities are. We're often working with client stakeholders who are basically charged with managing their normal day-to-day business activities as usual, but at the same time trying to effect change through these digital projects that they're working on. And because of that, the competing demands on their time, it's not always easy to get the continuous feedback and decisions that you need to utilize a purely agile way of working. The other thing, and this is becoming increasingly common in a lot of the work that we do, is that we're working in an interconnected world now. Very few of the solutions that we build are isolated just to the development function that exists within our own business. We're often integrating with third-party platforms and technologies to create the overall solution. And the moment you start to do that, you start to recognize that you've got a whole set of other external dependencies on other third parties, which have got to be managed and planned for in order to reconcile their contribution against a wider plan to produce that certainty and predictability that we talked about, or that I mentioned earlier on. So, for those reasons, whilst Agile is an absolutely fantastic way of staying light on your feet and effecting relatively small changes efficiently, when we're talking about new builds, the characteristics of Waterfall, and as I say, that certainty, that predictability can be really, really valuable. Where Waterfall falls down is that the decisions have typically got to be made earlier on in the life cycle of the project. And the risk is that if you don't manage that process effectively, that by the time you get to the delivery point, the requirements that you were speaking about at the early stages of the project have become invalidated by the ever-changing business environment. So it's not necessarily a silver bullet, but it is definitely a way of achieving a level of confidence and reassurance that when the level of requirement is fairly well known, and where there is an absolute need to understand with great clarity, cost and time, Waterfall can be a really useful way of achieving that.